From the Charleston carriage industry, the short-term rentals, to tour buses in Charleston, I speak exclusively with City of Charleston Director of Livability and Tourism, Dan Riccio, for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Dan Riccio, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
I appreciate it greatly.
Not a problem.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, you are the director for the City of Charleston's Livability and Tourism departments.
Yes, sir.
What is it like to be you these days?
It's definitely different to be me. I think the Department of Livability and Tourism is really unique. I think our responsibilities span over a wide variety of quality of life issues that are important to all citizens and the visitors. But I think that having, in my opinion, the resources under one umbrella to address these issues of quality of life, and what I mean by that, cleanliness, restaurant cleanliness, property maintenance,
Sure.
making sure graffiti's off these poles, things of that nature, making sure that the tourism industry is managed and permitted to make sure that they're doing the right thing and trying to make the tourism world coincide with the livability world so that we can try to strike that balance between the residents and the tourists that visit our city.
You talk about tourism management, and obviously the carriage company comes under that.
Yes, they do.
What is your understanding of the carriage industry now that you're in this position?
Well, I think the carriage industry is very unique. Obviously, their perception of people wanting to visit Charleston, they want to take a carriage ride. They want to step back in time. I love it. You know, I'm born and raised here in Charleston, so I'm very familiar with the carriage industry. But I think they're different. They have different aspects because they are animal-drawn carriages.
Mm.
They're open more to the elements with the people that are on these carriages during the tour. So I think, you know, when it comes to weather and things like that, and safety and traffic, I think that it's more heightened sense of alertness and to make sure that everything's conducted and managed in a way that is safe as possible.
You talk about safe as possible. Obviously today it's raining, it's
Yes.
lightning, it's thundering out here. And I know tomorrow you're going over to the city council to say, hey, I need help with emergency ordinances in cases such as, you know, obviously heat, rain, thunder. Why now?
Well, I'll tell you, and we're going to the subcommittee with the Tourism Commission first with some draft ordinances. And one of the topics is safety and emergency, during emergency weather and or other emergency-related events. Technically, and quite honestly, the ordinance does not allow the Director of Livability and Tourism to make those determinations for safety reasons to cancel more any tours and to cancel, more importantly, the carriage industry and their tours. I really feel that you know, we're a 7-day in operation, 364 days a year.
Yeah.
You know, it's not 9 to 5. And a lot of times we don't have the emergency preparedness people in place on the weekends when a unexpected incident happens or an unexpected weather event happens. So determination needs to be made. And without the authority to do so, it makes it quite difficult to implement, you know, a closure when the ordinance doesn't specifically define that I can do so. So I think it's important that there be some latitude and leeway there to make those, you know, life safety situation decisions.
And I know I went back and looked at the ordinance here. It says, the Code of Ordinances states that the carriage company operators and drivers shall use caution when working animals in adverse weather conditions such as high heat and humidity, snow, ice, heavy rain, and other slippery or reduced situations. When you think back 2 weeks ago to now, when the heat wave took place, what ordinance did you follow?
We follow a different ordinance for the heat. There's a specific ordinance that regulates during heightened heat situations and or heat index. So there's a protocol that we follow. It's under the care and welfare of the animals. It's to ensure that the animals in the industry are ensured that they are being taken care of. And basically how that works is we have a system in place where we monitor the thermometers at certain locations throughout the city. In case in point, the company that we use is a very credible company throughout the United States known as WeatherBug.
Right.
And there is a WeatherBug weather system and antenna system at the Doubletree Hotel, and there's one at the Gilliard,
Right.
and there's one at the Dock Street Theater.
Right.
And the ordinance requires us to use the one at the, monitor the one at the Doubletree, and in certain situations, if that particular one fails, then we use the backup
Okay.
thermometer at the Dock Street. So we monitor, and I say we, myself and the tourism enforcement officers and office staff, we all have the app on our telephones. And we also we have an alert system that no others get but us.
Okay.
The citizen doesn't get this alert because we hire the WeatherBug contract through them
Okay.
just for this reason. So they give us weather alerts whether the heat index is increasing or the temperature is increasing.
Okay.
And we always get a 5-degree heads up. It's 90 degrees. Start, getting prepared, and they'll start coming in. And when the threshold, according to the ordinances, if the temperature exceeds 95 degrees heat or the heat index of 110, we start what we call the clock process. There must be 4 15-minute readings to ensure that the weather is going to remain over 95. Because quite frankly, it fluctuates quite a bit. Clouds could go over, and which could impact the thermometer.
Sure.
And that'll decrease temperature. So clouds are away, the temperature rises, and to where it's going to, level off at. So once we get 4 readings, which is really 45 minutes of time, then we say, okay, we're calling it. Carriages have to come off the street, go back to the barn, and then we monitor again. So until the temperature starts backing under 95 degrees Fahrenheit or under 110 degree heat index, then we start that clock over again for 30 minutes.
Okay.
So that's given the industry kind of like, okay, we're watching. Are we going to be able to go back to work today? How's this going to play out? So at any time when we're going to return the carriages back to the street, if it back and forth from 95, say it goes to 94. If it goes back to 95 or again, clock starts over again. So we don't, and that's to ensure that we don't prematurely put the carriages back on the street.
Okay.
If that weather, if the temperature of the heat index indicates that it's going to continue to rise. If it continues to fall, it will continue to fall under that prescribed level.
Now, let me go back to that. It says the court ordinance states the carriage companies and operators and drivers shall use caution when working animals in adverse weather conditions such as high heat, humidity, snow, ice, heavy rain, and other slippery or reduced situations. They can use caution.
Yes.
How could you, in your mind, supersede that ordinance?
Well, that's a very good question. Here's the thing. That ordinance is from 1983.
Okay.
Were you born in 83?
84.
Okay. So you weren't born yet when that ordinance, and now, and let me equate that to your life. So, let me ask you, Quintin. You weren't born yet. That's a pretty long time ago, okay? So, that means the ordinance is pretty old. Times change, right? The incidents change, circumstances change. Look at the weather when you were, before you were born, and now. Global warming, sea level rise, everything's changing. That's when that ordinance was written. So one of the tasks that I have as a director, and what I have been pursuing, is a comprehensive, basic overview of the entire ordinance. That's one of my jobs.
Sure.
So when we see situations arise, and we have to equate it to an ordinance, we then determine this is too out of date. we have to offer an amendment to this to make it work to today's time, not 1982, 1983, because things change. So that's another issue that we're kind of dealing with. Carriage companies are feeling that I'm stepping on toes because I'm not adhering to that ordinance, and that's fine, but that gives them due caution. But I think as a city and a city representative, I have the duty and the responsibility for the safety of tourists, the employees of those carriage companies, and those animals. That's just the bottom line. That's how I feel, and that's why I'm pursuing a change in the ordinance to give me that latitude with authority and make that decision.
Now, in your mind, what basis is there a need for more oversight, more rules for the carriage industry?
I don't think it's the carriage industry itself. However, like I stated earlier, the carriage industry is more vulnerable than the rest of the industry, in my opinion.
Okay.
And this is how I make that opinion or my assessment.
Okay.
They're open carriages.
Sure.
You have up to 17 people on that carriages. There are no seatbelts. Okay? It's being pulled by an unpredictable animal. We don't know how that animal is going to interact with the traffic, with pedestrians, with car horns, with firing of a muffler, and more important, an extreme, unexpected weather event. And that was the emphasis of me making a decision several weeks ago to suspend temporarily carriage operations because of a threat of 60-mile-an-hour winds and a quarter-size gale coming into Charleston. Now, I'm not a weatherman and I'm not the Lord God, okay? So I rely on them both, correct? I'm not a professional.
Okay.
So if the weatherman with the weather service, who is a certified meteorologist, tells the community, heads up, this could happen. Not saying it will happen, but there is a high probability of a situation that can cause damage or injury or even death, then I feel it's my responsibility that I have to have the leeway, if you will, if they call it leeway, or oversight. I don't call it oversight, I call it common sense.
You say seatbelts are not obviously placed on those carriages. Would you ever have something like that inside in the new ordinance if you could?
You know, I don't know. We haven't. That's a good question. I've never thought about that up until this interview, but it all depends, and you base it on events, situations.
Okay.
So far to date, I mean, some people have fallen off carriages because the animal is spooked. But normally they don't. And if, for instance, or God forbid, if there was a series of events where people were always falling, then that would raise a red flag to say, you know, we need to go back and review this ordinance. And we need to see if this could be an option that may be a potential protection in the future to reduce injury or death.
Now, you said earlier that you really, when I actually talked about this ordinance here that says, hey, you give caution to the carriage companies and drivers when it's, obviously extreme weather conditions. You really don't use that anymore.
It's not used really anymore because if you read that 1980-something ordinance, it says heat. We already have another ordinance that pertains strictly to the heat. So this is one of those ordinances or one aspect of the ordinance that we're dissecting and looking at to see, does this really apply? And that's with our comprehensive digestion, if you will, of the ordinance and research of the ordinance and watching it. This is one of the most recent ones that have come about. That we need to look at this because, one, that's putting all the onus on the industry itself. And the question always is, well, isn't the city less liable if they have that determination? Yes and no. But I think if they're managed by it, we license them. We come into a civil agreement with a franchise agreement with them. So I feel that once we have done that, then we're taking on liability ourselves. And if we feel that the circumstances exist that's not specifically written in the ordinance, then we have to make that judgment call until we make such change to the ordinance to do so.
Now, I'm assuming you're just using a temporary ordinance until this one gets passed.
I'm not using temporary ordinance at all.
Okay.
I'm making a common sense decision.
Is that decision communicated, that is, with the other carriage companies?
Yes. The decision I make, the protocol we do, is I will contact the TEO, the Tourism Enforcement Officer, or the gate medallion clerk, who are issuing these medallions. And I do an assessment. How many carriages are out? This many. How many are in the line? None. So you have to start using your common sense. In this certain instance, when this thunderstorm was coming, I advised two tourism enforcement officers. All the barns are in close proximity to each other. Let's go to the barns, let them know, hey, we're watching this weather event. There could be a closure. Just give you a heads up. And we did that first. Once the warnings progressed and it said, hey, it's coming to Charleston, then I made that determination. It was a Saturday. There were no emergency managers with the city on duty that day. It was, other than that, a normal summer day until this popped up. And I just felt, when you hear 60-mile-an-hour winds and quarter-size hail, and you imagine 17 people exposed to that with an animal that could be pelted with hail, I made that decision to close it temporarily. And I reopened it an hour later after the threat had passed.
After it passed. Now, most of the carriage companies basically say, hey, we have perfect records when it comes to this type of weather or any type of events. Tell me this, how can the city of Charleston approve on that?
I think the industry, they take very good care of their animals. They operate their businesses in a manner that is safe. But I still feel that there should be the responsibility on us, because we are allowing them to conduct operations in the city. The carriage industry is totally different from every other industry, because the coach buses, the smaller tour buses, they're in a enclosed vehicle. They're basically going where they want to go with a permit. We are telling them, this is where you can go. The city is basically ordering them, when we give them a medallion, you're going to this zone.
Right.
So I'm taking on a responsibility, putting that carriage in that zone. I don't do that with the other industry. That's why I always stress, their industry, the carriage industry, is much more different than the actions of the operations of the other industry, because there already is more oversight because of congestion and safety and things like that. I have the authority to reroute in conjunction with the traffic and transportation director, to reroute a carriage zone due to safety issues if there's a construction project going on. We even go as far as we had an incident with a horse named Blondie several years ago with a cement truck.
Right.
Spooked it. That horse went down for an hour. They had everybody out there trying to get it back up. That spawned an investigation that I looked into, and one of the precautions I took away from that was, hey, if we know we have knowledge that there's going to be a cement truck in one of the zones, we're gonna do a reroute to make sure that those carriages are sent in another direction. I'm not going to stop operations, but we're going to allow them to go to a safer location to reduce the risk that may be involved with that tour.
And what else are you looking at when it comes to the Charleston carriage industry right now?
Nothing else that I wouldn't look at in any other industry. My job is to manage and enforce the ordinance.
Okay.
And my job is to make sure that their carriage drivers are pulling over when they're supposed to, when there's traffic behind them and they have the pullover opportunity. My job is to ensure that they're in the right zone that they're supposed to be in. My job is to ensure that those animals are taken care of and their temperatures are taken and their water breaks are taken, their days off are taken. We monitor all that through the records of the industry. So it's a pretty huge responsibility. We don't have that interaction with any other part of the industry. We manage them with permitting, but due to the nature of the carriage business, it's a more closely monitored situation because of their business, because they have animals, because there's a lot of people out there that feel that the animals aren't being taken care of. Is it my responsibility? Technically, in a sense, no, because this is a private industry. I'm not going to regulate their private business, but giving them a permit to allow them to operate within the limits of the city, then it's my responsibility to ensure that it's done in a safe manner. Since taking over tourism and Livability joining, we now have an equine manager on board because you see it with the horse advocates, you see the billboards, you see the flags throughout the city. There's a lot of people, they would rather not see the carriage industry at all. I don't believe in that. I believe that everybody should have free enterprise. This is the United States of America, correct? So I would never say abolish an industry, never. So what did I do? I made sure that I had somebody on staff that was trained specifically with equines to specifically monitor these equines, monitor their records on a regular basis. Prior to not having this equine manager, we would have one inspection a year by an outside vet. When I mean an outside vet, somebody out of the Charleston County area, because of the conflict it could cause, because most of the industry uses the same veterinarian.
Sure.
So that was only once a year. So I felt, okay, let me ease the minds of the people. Let me get somebody on board that's highly trained. My investigator, my equine manager, she is a national animal cruelty investigator, national equine cruelty investigator. She's a veterinary technician, and she's been to a course at Clemson for equine management, and she has a background with raising horses. She still owns horses. So having that in play, in my opinion, because I still think, even though it doesn't explicitly say I'm responsible for these animals, but the ordinance says that the industry needs to make sure that these ordinances are abided by. And my job is to make sure that the ordinances are abided by. So I put an extra measure of security in there. And oversight, if you want to call it oversight, it doesn't matter to me what you want to call it. I call it being precautious and using common sense.
Now, you talked earlier about the ordinances that you use for other tourist industries, such as the tour buses and whatnot. What are they?
Well, tour buses, and I say tour buses, the big old coach buses.
Yeah.
When they come into town, there's three things they have to do. Before coming to town now, we require pre-planning so that we know where these buses are going to be. Any heads up at all as possible is excellent. In the past, they would just go to the bus barn at the visitor center, every one of them. We had no idea until they came in and say, okay, I want to go here. I have this many passengers, and we're going to be at this hotel is where we're going to be. Now we have probably 90% that pre-plan. So we already have a heads up, and we pre-plan the permitting. So when they come into town, they have to have a transportation permit to be on the street in the city. We don't charge for that permit.
Okay.
They have to have a parking permit because there's only so many parking areas that will accommodate these large buses. And they have to be in these areas because if they go anywhere else, they're going to block the roads and cause safety issues. So it's our job to make sure that they're parked where they're supposed to be parked. And then when a tour guide steps on the bus, at any point in conjunction with that is they get a touring permit to be in the city. And it's still regulated. These big coach buses are only authorized on a perimeter route of the city. So that's another thing we're looking for with that industry, with that part of the industry. We make sure that they don't go off this route and into a side street. Why? Streets are not accommodating for large buses. We've had situations where a bus will go down a street it's not supposed to, and clip a oak tree limb or get stuck.
Right.
They have actually been stuck. So they have very rigid rules to follow too. And they need to be in the right area at the right time where they're told by the city or advised by the city to be. And we're not oversight or we're not picking on any part of the industry. But they're managed and regulated in it. It's the same way that the carriage industry. To me, there's no difference. The rules are in place, the permits are in place, and we are tasked with enforcing those rules.
Now you talk about rules. Obviously, there's a thriving late night business here in downtown Charleston. Why are there not any tourism enforcement there in your mind?
We have tourism officers up until 8 o'clock at night. Most of the industry, as you know, the certified bus tours, they calm down about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Or residential tours stops at 5:15.
Okay.
Okay, so that gives them to what 6:30 to get back. They do some commercial tours, but not that many. When I mean commercial tours at night, they stay on that. Basically, it's a perimeter route, commercial route. They can't go into any historic district residential neighborhoods. They stay on Meeting, Broad, East Bay, and back to the market. It's a loop, if you will. So there's not many of those. And about 8 o'clock, they usually, settle down. So that's why at this point, having 6 tourism officers, I think it's having them up to 8 o'clock at night is feasible at this point. If that changes, if we see an increase, and we'll do an assessment, and if we have to increase those hours, we will increase those hours.
Now you talked earlier about the industry. Obviously, the short-term rental business is booming here as well. How are you dealing with that as director?
I'm tasked with that as well. My department has 3 code enforcement officers, and they strictly focus on short-term rentals, and that's their job. So, like I was saying earlier, we have a little bit of everything with this: the graffiti, the quality of life things, and now, which impacts tourism too. We have short-term rental enforcement that we ensure that if they don't have a permit, they obtain a permit to operate in the city on a short-term basis.
Now, yesterday, a lot of folks went up to the South Carolina Supreme Court to talk about the future of ports in Charleston. When you look back at that meeting to now, what was your takeaway?
Well, it's my takeaway is everybody has their own reasoning for either supporting an issue or opposing an issue. I don't want any part of it, to be honest with you. That's in the courts. My job is to enforce and regulate what is sanctioned by City Council, the rules. If they change those rules, then that's what I will abide by. In the interim, I don't like getting involved with the lawsuit that's going on with the cruise ship. I honestly, to be honest with you, I don't pay any attention to it because I have to focus on what we're doing now, what we're tasked at doing, and what we're legally authorized to do. If there's opinions out there that don't want that cruise industry here, have at it. I'm not going to worry about that. So I don't want to get caught up in the weeds with some civil action that can impact the carriage or the cruise industry either positively or negatively. That's not what I can't concern myself with that. I have to concern myself with the rules and regulations that I am authorized to delegate and enforce.
Now, obviously, Charleston's really the #1 city in the world. Are there any other tourism officers in this country in your mind?
I don't believe so. Not in the fashion that we function.
Okay.
A lot of cities have ambassadors. They're not enforcement officers. And my guys and girls are ambassadors as well. They give directions and they guide people. Hey, they ask, where's a good restaurant? And they may point them there. So in a sense, they are ambassadors. But our city is very different in that we enforce an ordinance that's criminal in nature. I don't know if you know that. But these ordinances are criminal cases. So we have to treat them with the same protocol and integrity as you do any criminal case. You have to have probable cause beyond a reasonable doubt. They have a right to a jury trial. They have the same rights afforded them in any other criminal case. People laugh when I tell them, I said, you leave your garbage can out, it's a criminal offense. You could be charged with a crime. That's the teeth in the ordinance. Now, our intent is not to put anybody in jail, and I've never seen anybody go to jail for leaving a trash can. But it makes you come to attention to it. So that's just how we regulate with our criminal ordinances. With the short-term rentals, same thing. My deputy director was in San Francisco last month on a conference. They were hailing the city of Charleston as watch the city. They're doing it right. They have a criminal ordinance in place, and it's successful. If you want to regulate short-term rentals throughout the country, you better look at Charleston, because that's the way you need to do it. So people know how we function and how we operate. We're different. We're unique. But I think we're successful overall. Judge Maloney, God bless him, he's our judge. He's our livability court judge.
Right.
And I stick by this saying, always has. We can't make things perfect for you, but we can sure make things a whole lot better. So that's how we look at things. We can't make this a utopian society. Never will be. You're going to have issues. Nobody's ever going to be happy. There's always going to be somebody not happy about a decision that's made or whatever happens in a city. But we do our best to ensure that we do the best we can to make it better for you.
That brings me to my next question. How do you define quality of life as the director of the city's livability tourism departments?
Well, I define it. We are a multifaceted unit is what we are. Okay, so to describe that, I have code enforcement officers in residential areas that are on patrol. Just like a police officer, they're not police officers. They're looking for yards that are not being taken care of. They're looking for abandoned vehicles jacked up on blocks in these residential areas. They're looking for littered areas throughout the city. It's almost like the broken windows theory, okay, with quality of life. Clean it up as fast as possible. You clean it up, and the next person, you'd be surprised when we go into an area and we issue warnings. And we never go and issue a ticket right at the get-go. We always say, there's a certain circumstance for every individual that we deal with. So I ensure that my officers use as much discretion as we can use. There could be physical situations of not allowing you to do it. We've had my guys clean properties for people before because, she's 89 years old, doesn't have any family. Lord help me, what are you going to do? Lady, you got to do it yourself. No, I've had my guys cut the grass for them, and till they get on their feet, get with family members, and they appreciate that. And that's one part of quality of life and how we deal with it. Then that kind of stems over from residential into the commercial. The cleaner the city is, the more popular that city will be to visit. You don't want to go into a town that's always dirty. And that increases the quality of life for that visitor coming in town. When they come here and they go, wow, it's a clean city. Somebody's taking care of it. So that's my definition of quality of life. Having all my guys, boots on the grounds, making sure the little things that a lot of people don't think are big, they can become huge in the process if you don't deal with them. If you don't fix that broken window, the rest of the windows are going to get broken. If you fix that broken window, they're all going to stay fixed.
What do you know now about the carriage industry that you didn't know before taking this job?
It's a good question. I think that the industry feels that they're picked on because they are different in operational status. I can tell you with all certainty
Okay.
that me doing my job, I'm not for you or against you. I'm in the middle. If you come to me with a problem, I'm going to help you with that problem. If you're creating a problem, I have to educate you to correct that behavior. So, because you are this part of the industry, or this part, or you're an animal advocate, or whatever the case may be with the carriage industry, I'm not concerned with your view. I'm concerned with the behavior that you are displaying within your industry or within your view that and your stance that you're taking. So, am I picking on the carriage industry? No, not at all. I'm as neutral can be. I have no dog in the fight. My job is to manage and regulate, and that's what I do. You have to keep an open mind. You cannot be biased. You have to be neutral. You can't pick sides because you have to make the right decision.
Now, if there was going to be a decision about the emergency ordinance tomorrow, what do you want me to tell? What will you tell me on Quintin's close-ups the next time I interview you?
I will tell you this. I enforce the laws that the city council adopts. If it goes before the subcommittee of the tourism commission, then the commission, and they say, you know what, Dan, we don't think you should have the authority, I'm okay with that. Because that's called due process. That's why we have committees in place. That's why we have city council to enact laws. If the powers to be see that that is not a necessary ordinance to have, I'm good. I abide by that. And that's what I'll tell you in the next interview. Whatever decision comes out, I follow that decision. Simple as that.
Dan Riccio, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.